Well, Dave and Glenn, appreciate you being willing to have a conversation with us about this book of Ecclesiastes. It's an odd book. It's a unique book in Scripture. So often the voice that we hear in this book is one that seems foreign and strange. And if we didn't see it within the pages of our Bibles, we might think that it was from some other source that didn't belong in Scripture. The book opens and closes with this statement, vanity of vanities, or meaningless, meaningless. Everything is meaningless. And that just seems to strike at the heart of our faith. We believe that there's meaning in everything, that God is directing the courses of our lives in human history. And Ecclesiastes seems to offer a different voice. And so I'm just curious your thoughts. How does this book contribute to the canon? It belongs in the canon, but how did it get to be there? What are your thoughts in terms of how this book fits into the overall message of Scripture?
It's really a part of wisdom literature of the Old Testament, along with Proverbs and Job and passages and other books. And wisdom literature is a little different than most of the rest of the Old Testament or the New, in that it's really designed to reflect upon life and talk about how we can be skillful in living in this world. It's not necessarily filled with commands or prophetic words, but it's more reflections upon life that God has created. So it's a little bit of a different animal.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's kind of like the book of Job. If you don't know anything else about the Job other than the first and second chapters and the last one, then you've missed a tremendous amount of reflective material which asks very serious questions and ponders very difficult things. I have two reflections as I think about the canon issue. One of my professors at UW-Madison in my grad work said this was some pagan Jewish philosopher that just happened to get his book into the Old Testament. And the other experience is my very first experience in reading through the Bible. I had a Scofield Reference Bible, and C.I. Scofield says that this book is inspired only in the sense that inspiration guarantees the accuracy of the information, but it is not actually inspired. So very interesting approaches. And it wasn't really until, I guess it was in my years in Bible school that I read a book where the author said that this author's purpose, Ecclesiastes writer's purpose, was bold honesty. And that hit me as being really, I thought, precise and helpful. And it suddenly hit me that way. We're working on the Sango revision of the Bible, and the name for Ecclesiastes in Sango is Loti Fatene, which means the one who says the words. So it's kind of interesting, or puts forth words. So it's kind of interesting. But that's kind of, I feel like it has a very important place because it makes us think beyond what we've usually thought.
I think that's
I found the book also. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Dave.
I've also found the phrase that's often translated meaninglessness or vanity to be especially interesting in this time frame. The Hebrew word hevel means breath, and at this time of history, we're thinking about our breath and how widespread that breath goes, carrying, unfortunately for some, droplets of this coronavirus. And the idea is not breath literally, but the idea, I think, that our life is like a breath. We can't really control it. And so when we go out, we're to wear masks so that our breath is not deposited everywhere that we go. And I think for the book, the idea is that that life does not always yield the results that we expect. We can't really control how everything goes. And ultimately, it's in God's hands, and we need to be content with that.
Yeah,
I agree. I think that there's a sort of a play on the double meaning of the word hevel, in the sense that yet hevel means vanity and sometimes is applied to idols even, but it also means transientness or fleetingness or unpredictability. And so it's difficult to translate it one way or the other, and people try to force the translation into one category or the other. But I think both meanings are essential, that life is seemingly meaningless if we just look at the surface. and it is also brief. It is
Mhm.
transient. It is unpredictable. But those are parts of nature of it's difficult to find a single word in English that carries both of those meanings. But that's, I think, an important thing to realize, that there's a sort of a double meaning in this word. It's meant to grab several different ideas together.
Robert Alter, in his translation, suggests that preserving the physical allegory of breath or vapor is helpful for that reason, because it's meant to be a metaphor, not an abstract idea,
Right.
and that keeping that physical image of exhaling breath, and he distinguishes that it's not the ruach, the breath that gives life, it's the exhaling that
Mhm.
is, to lesser effect, and sort of that what you were describing, Dave. And I found that to be a helpful thought, that we're dealing with a word picture here, more than an abstract idea.
Mhm.
I think one of the things you said about bold honesty strikes home, because I think as we think about the way we read this book, and it sounds foreign to Scripture, to me highlights the fact that we tend to come to Scripture and expect something flat, something that's uniform, and that we can treat as all one thing, all commandments, or all just true stories, as opposed to what it really is, which is this richly textured and layered
Right.
collection of different types of writing. And so I'm curious how this book has been helpful in your spiritual life. I know for me that statement about bold honesty rings true, that we oftentimes approach faith as though it's something static, and that we simply repeat the formula, and that's supposed to help us navigate life. And Ecclesiastes seems to be sort of a counterpoint to say
Mhm.
those sorts of rigid formulas don't always work. They don't always hold up. And so a willingness to be boldly honest and to ask questions
Mhm.
seems to be part of the book. And I'm just wondering how that's helped you in your uh, journeys of faith navigate difficult times, or what role this book has played for you personally.
Yeah, I would say very definitely the book invites us to think and to reflect. Early in my spiritual life, I looked at the Bible as a source of simplistic answers.
Mm.
And I began to realize gradually over time that life was a little bit more complicated than that. And maybe there's not a verse for every situation that we find ourselves in. And I guess a couple things that has come across to me is the realization that just as we can't control our breath, we really can't always control life, and we really can't control God in the way that we think He will work. It strikes me that one of the aspects of God's that we don't talk a lot about is that God seems to love to surprise us at times, to
Mhm.
do things that
Yes.
we don't expect. We often tend to focus on prophecies that we think everybody understood. And then why didn't they see Jesus and understand him? Because everybody should have known. And we fail to realize that there's an awful lot of surprise going on in Jesus's life, just as there is in our lives. And I guess the other thing that the book has impressed me about is to be content in what I do. Don't always look at something as a means to something else, but enjoy what you're doing. Certainly, I've done a lot of different things, being a husband and father, being a chaplain, being a pastor, being a teacher. We can go on and on and on. But I really have found enjoyment in everything that God has put on my plate. Even in retirement, I find I don't really wake up any morning wondering what in the world am I going to find to do today. There's all kinds of things to do. There's not a paycheck connected to it,
Mm.
but at the same time, there is enjoyment that's connected to those as well. And I found that to be a helpful way to live.
Mm.
Yes, I agree with that. Particularly as I think about the book of Ecclesiastes and my own personal spiritual journey with it, I realized the idea of bold honesty really drew me into it. And
Mm.
not only it, but other books in the Old Testament, particularly Job, is a book that I've pondered many times. But two verses, particularly, one from Psalms and the other from Ecclesiastes here, have meant a lot to me. But before I mention that, I just think that James tapes up this same imagery where he
Mm.
says, "Wasn't your life isn't a vapor?" And so
Mm.
the idea of it being transient and being temporary makes us realize that we need to be thinking about the value of what we are doing in and of itself, and not so much what does it gain, where is it going, or what is that. And two verses, the one that stands out to me so much in Psalm 37, delight yourself also in the Lord, and he'll give you the desires of your heart. And I've pondered what the desires of my heart are many times and had to try to figure out, realize that God knows them better than I do. And so he has taken me through many, as David mentioned too, many different passages and very different places in life and doing different things. And that's where the other verse in Ecclesiastes 9:10 has been a real cardinal verse in my life, where it says, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. For there is no work or device or knowledge or wisdom in the grave where you are going. So whatever I'm doing, I want to do it with my strength, with my might. I want to do it because it's worth doing, and do it because it is of value in and of itself. And that's one of the things I think that stands out to me about the book of Ecclesiastes, is that the writer is saying, why are you really doing what you're doing? And make sure you know why. And that's been important to me.
That's really good. I appreciate the discussion and the conversation. It's a book that invites discussion and conversation, so helpful to start our exploration of it in this fashion, and to hear from you. It's helping shape my perspective. So thanks for contributing, and we'll look forward to a long conversation in this book as we seek God's guidance. So thanks so much for participating in this today.